Can you guys hear me?
Hello, we are live right now.
Yes.
I'm not hearing you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the
Now I just heard
work
you.
session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Otherwise, I'll go home.
I don't think she heard you.
Carol, can you please read the roll call? I think there's a problem with her audio.
Yeah. Carol, can you hear the supervisor? I'm gonna
Chatter.
Sure. Does anyone
Her phone is going straight to voicemail. Should I walk over?
yeah.
Yeah, I just sent her a chat.
Yep, she's trying. Okay. I don't know.
Did you text her, Kate? Hold on, one sec. I can do that.
Carol, can you hear us?
I don't think she can hear us.
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez?
Present. Present. Carol,
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez?
yeah, she can hear. I'm just gonna walk over. Just be right back. Well, she needs, maybe she signs in and signs out.
Yeah, that might work. It also might just be that her headphones aren't recognized on her computer.
How about now?
We
Check
can
one, two.
You hear me?
We can hear
Yeah.
you loud and clear.
Yes.
Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez?
Present.
Looking forward to going back to in-person meetings very
I
soon.
was about to say.
Councilman Leaf?
Here.
She took the headphones off.
Yeah.
I can hear you. You guys just can't hear me.
No, we can hear you.
Hear you.
I can't hear you guys, though. You hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Kyle, I need help.
Kyle to the rescue.
Yep. She's on mute. Oh, no.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Councilwoman Burke Gonzalez?
Present.
Thanks. Gotcha. You're awfully delayed. Councilman Leaf?
Present. Present.
Councilwoman Overby?
Here?
I'll watch your mouths.
Okay.
Councilwoman Rogers?
Present.
Supervisor Van Scoyac?
Present. Please join me in saying the Pledge of
Yeah,
Allegiance.
but I don't hear you. You come in way later.
I pledge allegiance to the
The
flag
flag of the United States of America,
to the
to
republic
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
So before we get started today, I just wanted to say that today is International Women's Day and March 8th. And this year's theme is to imagine gender equality in the world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. And I just want to say that I value the contributions of the women who are on our town board, making a difference in our community: Sylvia, Kathy, and Kate, my staff, Joanne Pilgrim and Ann Bell, and all the women in our town departments and throughout our community. This day celebrates women's achievements and spotlights the need for us to address the remaining inequities. So to all the women out there, happy International Women's Day. Today we'll have a public portion where any member of the public may call in and address any topic. We ask that you please mute your
Yeah,
devices.
but they're not doing this right now.
And if you would please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. The public portion will be followed by a discussion of the new airport, proposed revisions to Town Code Section 75, and proposed rules and regulations. We have our outside consultants from Cooley with us. We'll have the 2021 Ordinance Enforcement Report from Kevin Cooper, head of the department, and a discussion of the outdoor dining pilot program with Rick Whalen, John Jolnicki, and Jeremy Samuelson. That will be followed by liaison reports and resolutions. So at this point, let's go right to the phones. Do we have any callers on the line, Jason?
Yes, we do, and I am unmuting the first caller right now. Hello, caller ending 7221. Can you hear me? 1 second. Wait. Hey, there you are. Hey, 7221. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, you are live on air. Please announce yourself to the board.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Brad Lowen calling. I don't know if you remember last week I dropped a letter off from the Fisheries Advisory Committee. Did everybody read that?
Yes.
Yes, I did read it, Brad.
Okay, I'd like to read it again for those who may not have or misplaced it or whatever. The letter begins, Dear Town Board members, I'm writing this letter to remind you of the commitment you've made to the Fisheries Advisory Committee, fishermen and fishing industry to preserve and enhance the fisheries in East Hampton. We're especially concerned over the fact that we've seen no action from New York State Department of Environmental Conservation to revise its licensing regulations to allow younger people into the industry, nor has the town board acted on its implied promise to pursue answers to our questions. To explain again, the fishing industry operates under licenses issued by DEC. The industry accepts the necessity for them. However, the criteria that allow for new fishermen to apply for licenses are extremely difficult to meet. The ability of retiring fishermen or those wishing to leave the industry and transfer their licenses to others is highly restricted. As a result, though DEC does reissue some permits, most always after the death of a license holder, the net result is fewer permits and fewer participants in the industry. As you can imagine, there are no young people refreshing and maintaining the industry, and we're tottering on the edge of viability. This is most pronounced in the inshore fisheries. In March of 2021, the FAC held a Zoom meeting with Jim Gilmore, Chief, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Marine Bureau, and Ms. Kathy Haas, Acting Regional Director for DEC Region 1. We discussed our concerns about licensing procedures and the effects on the industry. They assured us they've already been considering the licensing proposals and a solution was to be offered shortly. No response has been forthcoming, to no surprise from the fishermen. In June of last year, we asked the town board for a special hearing on our need for licensing reform. Instead, we were told to attend a normally scheduled town board meeting. We were told Councilman Lease had informed the board of our talks with DEC in March, and the board would discuss it further. We were then dismissed as the meeting had already extended into the afternoon. No response from the board has been forthcoming. The lack of response from DEC was fully expected, as its stated policy is to eliminate as many licenses as possible. However, DEC has failed to recognize that its policies result in hardship and loss of the fisheries and ever-increasing numbers of what they call latent licenses. And the lack of response from the town board is very disappointing. The fishermen hoped the board understood the value of its fisheries. It's beginning to appear the board would prefer to see us gone. We feel the board sees us as a hindrance to its full-throated kowtowing toward the interests of offshore wind and questions we have about the environmental costs of large-scale oyster aquaculture. We do hope you will truly realize our worth and the precarious state the industry is in, and immediately ask what DEC has done to remedy the problems we have concerning licensing regulations. We are advising the board to ask that simple question of the DEC and demand a response from them in the shortest time possible. We also advise the board when there is no timely response, the FAC and full board hold a meeting to discuss options. This is a question of our survival. We hope the board will make an effort on our behalf. Brad Lowen.
Thank you.
That is my letter.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you guys have any questions, or can you give me any direction that you might be going here? We realize that the first step is very simple. Just ask the question that they told us was going to be resolved. Can the board do that for us?
Yes, yeah, Brad. In this letter, we did receive from you on your behalf late last week, I believe. And yeah, we're happy to, absolutely happy to reach out to the DEC and ask them what the status of dealing with latent licenses and those other issues that you mentioned.
Well, you know, we appreciate that, but we realize, the Fisheries Advisory Committee and the fishermen realize that that's a first step that is almost certainly likely to fail. You will not get a response, or you will certainly not get a satisfactory response. We're asking you to
won't know. We don't.
Bring us.
Yeah, we don't know what we'll get unless we ask.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll know what we get for a response until we ask.
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds like you think this is all predetermined, but I'm willing to, contact them and press this and see what we get for a response. And then we can, talk about how we might act next.
And that's the request that we're making right now. Indeed, we do have, from past experience, we expect that you will not get a satisfactory response. We hope otherwise, in which case we hope that we can get a commitment from the town board that we can discuss it directly with you and all of you so that we can figure out what our next step is going to be.
Yeah, and that is the purpose of the Fisheries Advisory Board, to, bring questions like this that can be related to the board, and then we can have a discussion about them. So again, I'm happy to reach out. DEC, I think there is a new fisheries person in the last year or so, and we will make that contact and make that request.
All right. Is it possible that you can give me a timeline where we might expect you to act?
Well, Brad, we actually have a FAC meeting next Friday. So how about as a total FAC that we get recommendations to the town board the week after? But I think we can actually probably make outreaches again sooner than that. But the FAC doesn't meet next Friday, Brad.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your effort.
Sure. Thanks for calling in, Brad.
Okay.
Okay.
Now.
Going on to next caller. I'm hoping that I got this thing working right for a second. Hold up. Give me a second, everybody. I apologize. We're just there's a small bug in the program right now, and I'm just gonna restart this phone line one time. I apologize for any interruptions, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hold up. Restarting it. People who call in once. You should be right there on the line again. Okay, restarting phone line. Everyone should still be on there. Well, my apologies, everybody. It's cycling through an update problem right now, and we should be good to go. Give me a second. Let's make absolutely sure. David Buddha, can you hear me? David, I hear you. Give me a second. Oh, there you are. David, there you are. Hello.
Hi, good morning. This is Dave Buddha. Is anyone on the other end of the line?
David, we are on the other end of the line. Thank you very much for your patience.
Is the board there?
Yes, the board is here, and you are ready to talk.
Okay. I guess this is the day finally that you're having technical difficulties. Your YouTube feed was delayed in coming on, but it's available now. My original phone call led to all sorts of faux pas. Anyway, here we go.
Right on.
I'd just like to make a brief comment. I do see that I'm calling to comment about the annual ordinance enforcement report. I see that it was posted either late yesterday or early today. So I am anxious to hear if the director of the Ordinance Enforcement Department give you an update on the progress and activities of the past year. One thing I hope that he does comment on, I see that the report says that you have 6 inspectors. I'm not sure with the resignation of 1 or 2 people last year whether those 6 positions are currently all filled. I wish he would comment on that. I also see that in his report he intends to show you pictures showing typical problems of types of violations. And one of the things that he seems to be ready to talk to you about is something I want to mention. It seems like the town of East Hampton, because of the tremendous amount of building activity and the lack of inspectors, sufficient inspectors in my opinion, seems to have entered a phase where building permits are deemed optional, and only when ongoing construction activity is noted by the enforcement department is anything done about that in too many instances. I think that the town needs to focus on the fact that we're in a building boom. Vacant lots are being built upon, and many times even licensed contractors take the liberty of starting a construction project without bothering to have proper building permits. Part of the problem is I don't think that there's sufficient follow-through with the courts on issuing violations, not just a notice and a warning, but actual summonses. If you don't bring people to court on a regular basis, they will tend to be recidivists and repeat the same bad behavior over and over again. You need to ask yourself, are you, the town board, the town code, the town enforcement officers, and the town courts, justice court, doing everything they can to enforce the laws and to encourage people to abide by them? I could point out to you one example that goes back to 2016 of where a fence violation, a gross fence violation was noted, was reported, was acted upon, was reported to the courts at least once, maybe twice, and still today that violation exists on Parsons Close in the Springs, and it just should not take 5 years to effect a remedy of complying with the town code. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And as you know, we have no control over the adjudication process with Justice Court.
And moving on to the next caller. And, Dave, just wanted to let you know, if the YouTube feed ever seems like it's up for a while, it's because I started about 15 seconds early just to make sure that the handshake initializes and that we're live streaming. That's all it is, David. All right. So I'm going to move.
Okay. It's good now, but I think it was delayed in becoming available through YouTube. Thank you very much.
Understood.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, David. Have a great day. Bye. Moving on to the next caller. Hello, caller ending 4010. You're on the air.
Thank you and good morning. I am here to discuss the recycling permits for those of us who pay East Hampton taxes but do not own automobiles. It seems both unfair and poor policy to financially penalize a taxpayer for using the transfer station if she doesn't own an automobile. To be clear, the only reason you charge me more to recycle my trash than you charge other taxpayers is because I don't own an automobile. Now, I understand there's an administrative convenience to affiliating a recycling permit with a motor vehicle registration, but it seems a pretty minor difficulty to overcome to issue dashboard placards to non-owners that would display the names of authorized household members, and the attendant at the recycling center could then quickly match against the name of a driver's license. If there are very few people to whom this accommodation would apply, then the administrative inconvenience would be extremely trivial. If there are a number of people to whom it would apply, then any administrative inconvenience would be easily overcome by the number of people currently treated inequitably. So I would appreciate if you would articulate how you justify charging me more to recycle my trash than you charge a materially similar taxpayer who owns a car. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just please state your name for the record?
My name is Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Desser, D-E-S-S-E-R.
Thank you very much, Mr. Desser. So if I understand this correctly, you're being charged a per visit charge because you don't have a sticker for an automobile. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
I see. Well, that's certainly something we could look at changing, but I hope you understand that dashboard placard could be then used by anyone, and it's required steps to try and verify who the household members are and take time for the person manning the booth to check IDs and whatnot.
It seems pretty trivial to me. I mean, I understand that it is more than what is done now, which is simply looked at a sticker on a bumper, but it's simply looking at a placard in a windshield and saying, "Show me your ID." You open your license, and there's your name.
Understood. That's something we can take a look at. I can't say that I've run
Okay,
into
I would appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Be well.
Thank you. Good morning.
And with that said, we have no other callers currently on the line.
Okay, I guess we can move on then to our first topic to discuss, and that's the new airport, the proposed revisions to the Town Code Section 75, and proposed rules and regulations. And I believe we have Bill O'Connor from Cooley in the waiting room.
Coming in right now.
Thank you. Good morning, Bill. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Good. Mr. Supervisor, members of the town board, here today to present to you proposed revisions to the town code sections that deal with the airport. And of course, this is in anticipation of the change of status of the airport from public use to private use. And the idea here is to have all of the administrative, regulatory, and enforcement pieces in place when the airport is set for reactivation on May 19th. This is different than what we talked about last week, which is the actual PPR framework. These are the rules and the regulations that will implement that PPR framework once it is determined. I did see the press release that went out this morning from the supervisor's office, encouraging comment on the PPR framework, and of course that process is ongoing, and would encourage all people to get those comments in so they can be considered. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can talk about how this is proposed to work here. And you should all be able to see that, hopefully with no problems.
You're good.
Great, thank you, Jason. This is a fairly short agenda. I want to talk about proposed revisions to the Town Code section, Chapter 75, which has to do with the current East Hampton Airport, and proposed rules and regulations that will govern the new private use airport. The PPR framework will ultimately become part of those rules and regulations as an attachment once those are decided, as will proposed landing fees for the new private use airport, and some tools that we recommend giving to the airport director to deal with situations as they arise. The current Chapter 75 regarding the airport, it addresses both administrative and operational aspects of the airport. So in other words, the daily management tasks are discussed in the code, for example, where fueling can take place and when. What we're suggesting through the repeal of Chapter 75 and the implementation of a new airport section is that a lot of those day-to-day administrative aspects of the airport be moved into the rules and regulations. By the way, both of these documents, the proposed revisions to the town code for the airport and the draft rules and regulations, were posted yesterday. Clearly, with the change in status, the code needs to be amended to recognize that the new airport is a private use facility. The enforcement structure for the use of the airport, specifically violations of the PPR, for example, or other operating rules at the airport, those will be in the town code. And then the rules and regulations will govern the operational aspects of the new airport. And what you'll end up with is that current Chapter 75 is going to be repealed. The proposed revisions to the town code really just retains the administrative and enforcement mechanisms of the airport section. There is a placeholder for what the penalties will be for violations of those rules and regulations, including the PPR. That is still under consideration, but as far as the mechanics go, it will be included within the airport town code section. Now, the next part of this is the actual proposed rules and regulations. The airport code section recognizes that those exist and that those rules and regulations will govern the operation of the new airport as a private use facility. It will govern all aspects of activity at the airport, and by using the airport pursuant to the rules and regulations, for the private use facility, that is acknowledgement and consent to abide by the rules. The rules can be amended by the town board upon resolution. That's what's set out in the rules and regulations, as opposed to an amendment of a town code section, which would be, as far as a procedural process, less desirable. So this allows you to make changes to the rules and regulations by resolution. I mentioned that the attachments already that will be part of the rules and regulations. That's the PPR, the landing fee schedule, and rules that apply to the airport director for addressing situations that may not be expressly addressed in the rules and regulations themselves. The rules are intended to provide the town board and the airport director with the ability to ensure safe and compliant operations at the new private use airport. And they are contemplated to go into effect on May 19th at 9 a.m., which is, of course, when the new private use airport will be activated. Public comment, of course, is welcome on both the amendments to the town code section addressing the airport and the rules and regulations. According to your process, you do need to have a public hearing. I understand that can happen sometime in April after a resolution is passed at your next town board meeting to have such a hearing to adopt these amendments. So this is a pretty straightforward mechanical aspect of our transition of the status of the airport to private use. We're essentially taking the administrative aspects out of the town code section regarding the airport, moving them into a separate rules and regulations document that will be subject to public comment and comment from the board as well. And we expect to have these pieces in place, of course, prior to the 2022 season. So if there are any questions for me, I'm happy to address them. I know the town board has seen both documents, and as I mentioned at the outset, we would encourage public comment on both the code amendments and the rules and regulations themselves.
Thank you, Bill. And this is a necessary step to bring our code up to date to reflect the pending changes at the airport. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Well, I just noticed in section 2A general number 8, solicitation, advertisement, assembly, and demonstration. The language in there needs a little bit of tightening up, but I'm happy to work with David McMaster to just clean that up. It references, the special events chapter, the peddling chapter, and things like that. So it's an easy fix.
Great. Yes, Kathy, we'll work with David to make sure that it harmonizes with all other aspects of the code, which is, of course, is an important part of this process, getting further town board comment and public comment as well. So thank you.
So basically what we're saying is chapter 75 needs a public hearing, and we're looking to have those changes heard in April. But what you're saying is the proposed rules and regulations, they can be changed from time to time by town board resolution, correct, Bill?
That's correct. Once you change the way that this is structured in the town code, it contemplates that further changes to the rules and regulations would be by town board resolution because they no longer live in the town code.
And Bill, as far as, sorry, I apologize, Kathy.
I was just going to say, and for now, attachment A, which would be the prior permission required rules, would be what we're studying for the 2022 season.
Exactly right, Kathy. And that would be made clear in terms of
We're looking to do that first on the 7th or the 21st of April. And when is best for any residents to get any comments or concerns back to the town board? As soon as possible or before those dates? Do you just go
I would defer to Peter or John in terms of the best mechanism. I think the earliest we talked about a public hearing would be on April 7th.
Correct. Yeah, so we can schedule on the 17th for this to occur, or the 15th, and then for an April 7th hearing. Public comments, we can receive them, before the public hearing, but to be part of the record, they should be submitted as part of the public hearing record, either by email or written letter, or by calling in. Or appearing, maybe even appearing in person. We'll see how things go, but we may be back to in-person meetings on the 17th. So any one of those ways you can participate and make your comments and opinions known to us, and we certainly encourage you to do so.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, thank you very much, Bill.
Great. Nice to see everybody.
Oh, and the only other thing is, like, just this morning, we put up the draft landing fee schedule. So for those folks that had maybe downloaded yesterday the documents for today, there's a new document up that went up this morning with the proposed landing fee schedule.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Kathy.
And so everybody's aware that would ultimately be attachment B to the rules and regulations. Great.
Okay, thanks, Bill. We'll now move on to the 2021 Ordinance Enforcement Report with Director of Code Enforcement, Kevin Cooper, will be joining us.
Entering the waiting room right now, entering the meeting right now.
Thank you, Jason. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Hi. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Very well, thank
Kevin.
you.
Good.
Kevin, you have our 2021 Ordinance Enforcement Report, giving us some stats and some background on how the year went, and I guess any issues you think we need to be particularly focused on. And
yeah. Thanks for having me.
And if you could talk about the current staffing levels as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I know you guys are busy. I just want to go over real quick what we did in 2021 and just show you what we're going to be focusing on as we go forward in the spring into the summer. Let me see if I can get my PowerPoint going. You see it? Is it up there?
Yes.
Right, here we go.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay. Basically, I have 6 inspectors right now myself, 1 administrative assistant, and I also have animal control. I have 2 animal control officers working. I have a position vacancy out for one more inspector. So that'll give me 7. I hope to have that person on board by April, so I can get him or her trained going into the summer. So they're all out there every day. I think they do a great job. They're on patrol. They're picking up things. We don't wait for people to call in or somebody to email us and something. They're out there being proactive every day of the week. So of course I would love more, but right now I think we're doing very well with what we have. So
great.
Okay, so I just want to go over last year our complaints. I call them complaints, but they're really I like it more of an incident number, because we do, in those numbers there's tickets we issue, inspections we do. Not every one of those numbers you see there is a complaint. So it's kind of a term. It could be a few terms: incidents, complaints, whatever you want to call it. But that's a 2021. Now I started here the first week of May. And I wasn't here for 2020, of course. You see the safety numbers in 2020, they're a little skewed because they were doing safety inspections for COVID. So that's why you see the bigger number for 2020. I highlighted the leaf blowers. We started the leaf blower enforcement after a couple-week grace period for education, getting the flyers out there at the end of May into June. And those are the leaf blower complaints, the people calling in, emailing, that they saw or heard leaf blowers going, in their neighborhood. So, and I broke down the complaints by hamlet. I did a little pie chart there. You see East Hampton has the most. It's probably the biggest area of residents living in East Hampton. That's probably why that number is biggest, and then followed by Springs. And then I just did a breakdown by month. just being here 10 months, I'm still trying to get a handle on what's the busiest month, what's the busiest day, and you know, stuff like that. But I just broke it down to you just so you saw, you know, where we're at monthly. And here's our activity. This is just summonses, you know, the field appearance tickets for 21. Now, it's 202 tickets, but it's actually a total of 394 counts. What happens is if we get on a site and we issue a ticket and there's more than one violation, they'll put all the violations on one ticket. So that's why it's actually 394 counts. If we did 394 tickets, it would just take up too much time. And so it's easier to put multiple violations on one ticket. So that's why that 394, that's what explains that 394 count number. If you have any questions, just please pop in and ask while I'm going along. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. And I also do animal control. They're kind of under the radar, but the two animal control officers I have, they're really, really great, and they're very busy. And as many people that we have that live out here that are concerned about the environment and clearing and wetlands and the beaches, we have just as many, if not more, people that love animals and they're concerned about the animals in our town. So I threw this up there. I put it in the PowerPoint just to let you know that they are busy. They are out there. They are on patrol, and they're constantly getting phone calls from people who are worried about animals, loose animals, you know, and people that have, you know, negative interactions with animals. So I just wanted to acknowledge them also. So those are their complaints. They, you know, they categorize them. They have a bunch of different categories. A lot of the wildlife referrals are deer, you know, other animals besides dogs. And this is what they did. They impounded 97 dogs during the year, and the fees they collected. I just wanted to show you that they, you know, they are out there and they are busy. And that's it basically for my numbers. I just wanted to show you some of the things this winter that we've been encountering as far as complaints. This was workers that were sleeping in a vehicle on a construction site. So we got the complaint, we went out, and we found this vehicle, and somebody was living in it or sleeping in it overnight on the site. So we remedied that right away. They were plugged into the electric that they had there. We also had another house where we found 9 workers sleeping in it. It didn't have a CO yet. It was under construction. They had the fireplace working, and they rigged the heat illegally through the garage into the house. And we immediately issued a stop work order. We got them out of the house, and we had work with the buildings department. We shut the site down until buildings was happy that they took the illegal heating rig out. And we've done multiple inspections. We'll come in 4 in the morning. A couple of us will come in and we'll go out and we'll do, you know, houses that we have given summonses to and houses that we have new complaints on, and we'll check that. So, and then we'll also stay late some nights, you know, up to midnight, and also check on those houses. And working late and early, real early, also gives us a chance to check on our lighting complaints. We've had a lot of complaints with uplighting this winter, and you know, we have to go out on them in the, you know, when it's dark out. So that's for some reason the uplighting's been a popular complaint this winter, but we've been handling them, and people have been complying. We haven't had a problem. This is the actual construction site that they started. They were going to build a new modular home, and they didn't have any permits at all. And this is something that we rolled up on and observed, and shut them down until they got a permit. You know, it was a whole foundation that was poured. This is the other side of it, and you know, we've seen a lot of that this winter. People not wanting, either not having the permit, or they don't want to wait until the building department has processed the permits, and they just start going. And that's why, you know, my people are out there riding around, and they'll check, you know, every site that they roll up on. If the building permit isn't displayed, they'll go in and inquire what's going on. And that's been kind of prevalent this winter also. This was one I wanted to show you, which is a little unusual. Somebody built a whole retaining wall on their property made out of tires. So we got the complaint, we went out and we conferred with Ann over in buildings, and it's illegal for a few reasons. They're hazardous, and if they start burning, that smoke, it's not good smoke. If you ever been around rubber burning, it's real thick and acrid and toxic. So these people are in the process of removing the wall, and we'll remediate how they're gonna deal with the property after the tires are gone.
That looks like an EPA issue right there too.
Yeah, maybe I should give them a call on that. That's a good point, David. And but we were out there, and we're making sure that they're taking it down. They've been compliant. The owners have been good with us. So that's just the other side of it. You can see they built it up. So, and this is just another house. These people didn't want to wait for the permit to be approved, so they knocked everything down except for the chimney, and they started working. You can see that's a little bit of a view farther away. You can see only the chimney there. This isn't a new house. This is a house that was built, and they gutted it down to the first floor, and they left the chimney up. So we stopped that right away. All right. And just moving forward, March into April right now, like I said, we've been focusing on building and zoning complaints, the contractor and peddler licenses. We've given out 19 summonses so far this year for no contractor licenses on sites, and 6 peddler summonses. Mostly it's the food trucks driving around to the sites. We've been trying to concentrate on the clearings. I know it's a big issue. I've been in the community boards that I have talked to, people that call in. I tell them, please call us as soon as you see the first tree cut. Don't wait. Let us get out there, and get in front of the clearing and find out what's going on. And the drag out and uncovered trucks. We're getting into landscaping season. People are going to start working on their property. You're going to see us more over at sanitation, checking trucks that come in, and you're going to see more of us on Springs Fireplace Road, looking for drag out from the businesses out there. And then when we move into May and the summer months, of course, once May 20th hits, we're going to be big on the leaf blowers. The chronic rentals, I have a list of 10 from last summer, and my plan is for the rentals, the chronic rentals, is to get out there the first Friday in May and start contacting the homeowners, letting them know that we're going to be monitoring their properties, and please just to try to educate them and let them know that try to be good neighbors and watch who they're renting to. And then as we go forward, every Friday for the whole summer, my guys are going to knock on the door to whoever they're renting to and just give them the lowdown on what's going on, the rules and noise, parties and stuff like that. So we'll be out there on our chronic, and I hope we don't add to that list, but if we do, we'll be out to any houses on Fridays knocking on doors. Also, the noise will be out, this summer. We have our noise meters. I just got them recalibrated, so we're ready to go with that. And then, of course, during the summer, we don't forget about everything else, the building, the zoning, contracting, everything else. We don't, just because the summer starts and we're worried about rentals and noise, we don't lay down on anything else. We'll be working on everything. So I'm looking forward to being busy. I've enjoyed my first 10 months here, and been working with David with some things, and Kathy, and like I told David the other day, I said, whatever you have, don't be shy. Please let us know. I'll get right out on it. And, everything's been working out good. So I think that's it. Any questions?
So Kevin, some of those slides that you show are pretty egregious.
Yeah.
In terms of, building without a permit. I mean, the fact that somebody cleared a property and actually put in a foundation without even getting a building permit is kind of astounding.
Yeah.
In this day and age. And your point about encouraging the public to call, when they see the first sign of some kind of activity like this, so that you have an opportunity to know about it and then send staff out there, personnel, to deal with those issues as early as possible is really helpful.
Yeah.
Those slides are kind of like the worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
I think the most egregious. And how would you characterize them in terms of quantity? These are just a few really exceptional cases.
Yeah, no, there's not. No, it's just a few. Most of the properties we inspect, maybe it's a house number missing, or they need a safety fence up, or there's some construction debris. It's minor stuff. There's very few that are like you said, egregious like this. Yeah.
Yeah, glad to hear that. Obviously, we don't want any types of activity as egregious as that occurring. And, so we appreciate your efforts. I know you all are out being proactive and not just responding to calls, but again,
Right.
Members of the community can be very helpful. You can't be everywhere all the time.
No.
And so those types of calls are welcome.
Yeah, it's all about getting out of the car and just talking to the contractors, so they know we're out there for their next job. Talking to a project manager and know that we're out there and what we expect of them. And then I think that'll work over time, where we won't see any more of these egregious complaints.
Right. Any questions or comments from other board members?
What I'd like to say is that, I guess it was last fall, Kevin, when you had a crew out at the East Hampton Recycling Center, just to remind folks, and particularly contractors and landscapers, to cover and secure their loads. It was an educational piece, because we had, comments from folks in the community we all hear it at our CACs, concerned about litter. And I appreciated the work you did there. And so did the community. And then the other thing I don't think you mentioned was, we had the COVID testing going on here at Town Hall and then over at CDCH, and what a valuable role your officers played in keeping people informed and working the lines, because we know that there were a great deal of people taking advantage of the testing that was offered.
Yeah, no problem. I met a lot of people over there on the lines those 3 or 4 weeks we're out there. It was actually pretty good, because I got to talk to people, and it was enlightening. And we'll be out there again at sanitation, giving out our flyers and stuff once the weather gets a little bit better. And so you'll see us out there. But I don't really worry about numbers that much. I don't get crazy about numbers. I never did. It's the feedback and the response I'm getting from the community and people I talk to. That's really what you use as a barometer for how we're doing. So.
Well, the interactions with the community, I'll say, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback.
Thank you.
About your interactions with the department. So, keep up the good work. We appreciate it.
And your availability, coming to all of our CACs and listening to, members of the community there is invaluable as well.
Yeah, well, this was something new for me when I came in May. So I'm still learning. I watched the ARB, the ZBA, all the meetings and stuff on YouTube. I'm still learning. So, and people out there, they have a lot to offer also. So it's good. It's good. It's always a learning experience, which is good.
Well, Kevin, I do have to say, in May, when you came in, you were coming right into the fire that season. I remember meeting you on the streets of Monotalk one day as you're getting out with your staff members, valuable staff members, to go up and down the street to introduce yourself. And I went with you to a couple locations.
Yeah.
That interaction, I think, put people at ease also out there. But your staff members are value members of our workforce here at the town. They do a lot of great work out there. I know just recently we've been working with Highway. I was going to mention this in my liaison report with construction issues, drag out, safety issues, violations, dormant construction that can be very dangerous or attractive nuisances. Then also, or even more so, right-of-way issues in which individuals are just planting into the right-of-way and such. So I appreciate you working with the other departments also. What I want to just say is there, and I know we mentioned this in the past, not for necessarily your thoughts now, but as you move forward into budget time, is a potential enforcement officer for environmental standards that we might have. I don't know if it's an environmental specialist title in the enforcement ranks. One that would be able to go look at wetland violations. Is that easement languages that we have? Someone that might be a little bit more educated. Not saying you're not educated at all, but just the specific tax that we hold so dear to us out here. So, maybe bring that back to the board, because there's a lot that goes on in the town, and your department has a lot of responsibility. And I thank you for the way that you've led your department this past year. It's been nice to watch.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I'll look into that with Human Resources, that position, and I'll see where I could go. Kim Shore and Mark Abramson over in Natural Resources, they're great, because we do get the clearings and clearing into wetlands and that stuff. It's very complicated, and they'll go right out with us, whenever we need, and they're always available for us. So I appreciate them.
Thank you.
I just want to add that thank you for your responsiveness, Kevin, to anyone who calls, and you or anyone on your staff is there pretty much immediately. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback. One of the things I keep getting inquiries about is contractor licenses. I don't know why, but that if you guys are checking for contractor licenses to make sure that they do have, and they're not doing work out here that they're not licensed to do. And I know that that's happened a couple of times. And the clearing issues are because of the building boom that's going on out here, has become a real issue.
Yeah. Like I said, we issued 19 no contractor licenses already this year. So we're trying to stay on top of it. It's been a busy January and February so far. I mean, we've issued 23 stop work orders and 27 notice of violations. I've been surprised, because the guys were telling, and girls, they were telling me it's going to be very quiet, and it hasn't. So, but I'm glad, because we're out there and they've kept busy. So, and I'm looking forward, hopefully, to getting those the administrative bureau going with those summonses. That'll make our job a lot easier and quicker.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we are, I think we're pretty much on track to try to get those.
That's great. Thank you.
In place. That's an important component of enforcement.
Yep. Or I see David. David there. David's been great. He's been awesome. He's been working with us. He's always available to questions. I throw things at him, and he always gives me an answer. And he works with us in court. Making sure that the properties or the individuals that need to know that we're serious about things. They get the message. So I appreciate his help.
Very good. Thanks again, Kevin. We appreciate your efforts, and stay safe out there. And
all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Anytime. See you later.
So next up, we have a discussion of the outdoor dining pilot program. And this effort was initially in response to COVID, in that we suspended some of the local zoning laws to enable local restaurants to be able to operate more safely and to serve folks in an outdoor setting, which was deemed to be safer than indoors. And so we've relaxed those rules now for 2 summers, and we've had the intention of codifying some of these changes in a way that businesses could continue to take advantage of outdoor dining. I think it's been pretty broadly accepted and appreciated by members of the public and businesses alike. And so, we do want to go through this outdoor pilot program yet again. And I know, Sylvia, you've worked quite a bit on this with the business committee. And
I think from January till now, this has sort of been our focus. And I really have to thank Rick Whalen, who was on the call and has gone through this with John Jilnicki as well, and Jeremy Samuelson. Thank you guys for all your input. And the business committee has been very informative and helpful in guiding this. So I think, Rick, you're going to give us the introduction.
Sure. You ready?
Okay.
Yes. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. Well, I guess it just turned noon here. So good afternoon, everyone. Richard Whalen, I'm a member of the Town Business Committee, as Sylvia indicated. And I've, conspired with John on this draft of the proposed outdoor dining legislation, outdoor dining law. And by the way, just for the record too, since I am an attorney in private practice, I just want to note, I don't have any clients who are restaurants. So I have no conflict in working on this. So John did the original draft and I did some changes to it, and we've run this through the committee a couple of times. We haven't completely resolved. There's a couple of outstanding questions, but let me just describe to you what the proposed law would do. And as you say, this kind of harks back to the beginning of the COVID situation where, restaurants said they were going to be operating. A lot of people felt a lot more comfortable being outdoors. So what the law allows is it allows for restaurants to move up to all of their indoor dining seats outdoors if they have the space to do that and if they get a permit to do it. Now, not every restaurant can move 100% of its, in certain zoning districts, in a couple zoning districts, the law would only allow up to 75% of the indoor dining to be moved outdoors. And it doesn't, very importantly, this does not constitute an increase in the number of seats which a restaurant can have. So if you have, let's just say 80 seats, you can move, if you're in the right zone, you can move up to all of those seats to an outdoor area. You have to have the space to do that, and you have to get a permit under the proposed law. So the law proposes to allow this to be done through an administrative permit issued by the planning department. The idea is to try to make this relatively simple. There is no public hearing involved. It's as I said, administrative permit. The planning department would handle it. It's intended to be a simplified process that avoids, because there's always the alternative of going through site plan review with the planning board, but that takes a long time. So the idea is to give restaurants some flexibility and to get a permit through the planning department. The permits are annually renewable, so they're not actually permanent. If you get a permit, each year you would have to renew it. In moving outdoor dining moving any of your indoor dining to an outdoor area, the planning department is not allowed to approve really permanent fixed types of improvements. So they can be flagstone for walks or, under the tables and so forth. And you can put down gravel, but you can't put down a surface. You can't use a structure or surface that would have a concrete footing. So everything that's can be done in terms of an outdoor dining area is intended to be removable. And as I said, you have to renew your permit each year. Most places probably will. I mean, if they're anticipating having dining after dark, they will presumably want a lighting. So in that case, the restaurant would have to apply simultaneously for an administrative lighting permit, which is already in the code and is already reviewed by the planning department. So it is possible that a restaurant would apply both for the outdoor, what we call the transfer of outdoor dining area administrative permit, and they may at the same time have to apply for an administrative lighting permit if they're going to have lighting. There are limitations on how, let me turn to that part of it, what the hours of operation. And now a restaurant that gets such a permit could operate outdoors, could have outdoor dining between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. daily. So it could be as late as 11 p.m. But amplified music is only allowed between 1 p.m. and 9 p.m. And of course, any restaurant has to comply with the decibel limits in the town code and the town noise ordinance. Just see what else there is of note. The application would be made to the planning department. The planning department, the main objectives here for the planning department are to ensure that neighboring properties, particularly if they're residential properties, are screened in terms of both noise and light. Those are the main concerns. Not every restaurant will have the physical space to do this, obviously. You're not allowed to displace an existing parking area. You can't displace something that was a condition of a prior site plan approval. So, for example, you can't put your dining in the parking lot. You can't remove existing required landscaping. things like that. So you have to have the room to do this without interfering with an existing site plan approval. And as I said, the occupancy that can be transferred is up to 100% of your existing indoor seating. There's no increase in seating. You can't keep the same amount indoors. You can't keep any indoor seating that is being transferred outdoors. So there's supposed to be no net increase in the number of restaurant seats for anyone who's complying using this permit process. So that's a general overview. Does anyone have any questions?
So also included is there's no bar use outside. You can't transfer your bar to the outside. It's really just for outdoor dining. And you can't introduce any new use inside or outside to it, whatever you're doing and wherever your seating is. You can't put in any other new use.
Yeah, Sylvia's point is well taken. So this is not for bar, not for the drinking area. This is only for dining. And as Sylvia says, you can't replace the indoor space that you freed up. If you free it up, it's because you want those people to be able to dine outdoors. But you can't then, replace that space with something else, whether it's additional seats or some other activity.
So
we actually.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we have a couple of slides that sort of share some of this info in a hopefully digestible way if we can get those put up. But I'm sorry, Kathy.
I was just going to say I fully support the program, but I do have a question. So we're calling this a pilot program. So is there a sunset on this program?
We haven't determined that. But
yeah, we haven't determined that.
Yeah, that's something that we're asking, the town board to say how long this pilot program should be in effect before some of these things might get codified completely into the code.
I guess for me, I feel like we've already had our pilot program for the last 2 years during COVID, and I'm ready to move forward with this as, to be put in place.
So
I think the concern is to, and I agree with you, Kathy, that I think a lot of this can be put into place, but I think the concern is, 100% moving into out. We can do 50%, would work, but I'm not, I don't want to have a pre-idea of what's going to happen. I think this is pretty broad brush stroke, and it's a real something that we've seen that I think the restaurants want and people that come to visit us want. But we do need to make sure that we don't overtax our resources.
Well, shouldn't this though, I guess I kind of equate this to special events where, the committee reviews an application and in certain cases needs to put conditions on it because of, the location. For instance, it's in a residential neighborhood, so they don't get music till 11 o'clock. They only get it to 10 o'clock. So is there a way to just give more discretion for conditions to the planning department who are going to be issuing these administrative permits?
I think that puts the planning department in a really tough position. Because you're talking about site plan issues that I think really need to go through the public process and go through the planning board itself. So I really, for me, I would be cautious and I don't think every restaurant should have, a different set of rules. And that's another problem. So I think this, and nor do I think the planning department should be in charge of that. So
essentially, this is an effort to make an administrative process for certain aspects of outside dining, outdoor dining. Yep. Whereas, to be a permanent situation, that restaurant owner still has the ability to go through site plan for permanent changes, to get a permanent outdoor dining area, et cetera. That's still available as an option. But this would allow on an annual basis for people to go through an administrative process. One of the benefits of that is that if you have specific issues where the property is somehow problematic because of this administrative permit, that you could withhold it, or you could then apply conditions for issuance in a subsequent year. The discussion is whether or not we should make this administrative process, permanent now or if we should give it a try for a year. I don't have strong feelings about it one way or the other. But I do think it's time that we have administrative processes for some of the applications and changes at businesses in town, provided that, that it's got the appropriate oversight and forethought as to what the impacts might be.
My question, and looking at it as a pilot program, may answer this question. It could be a matter of when we're saying, is it 100% that they can bring outside or 50% to look at the area that they have to transfer tables outside and some kind of determination on how much space is required for a set amount of tables and perhaps that can help, like a dimensional table in zoning. And you have this much space, you can do this. And perhaps that would be a way to regulate how many tables are going outside.
So I think it's a great question, Kate. I mean, we had assumed that the existing setbacks would be appropriate to use here. We had actually originally contemplated having double setbacks, particularly in areas where there may be residentially zoned neighbors. And what we found was that that was really, it basically made it moot in terms of how much area was left. If we had doubled the setbacks that would be required. So, I think there's a question that's on the table about 100% of seats outside versus some percentage of that. And there's actually a distinction that gets made in here where only 75% of seats are allowed to come out, in an area that is actually residentially zoned. So as opposed to in an area that's commercially zoned. So if David, I don't know, you had said maybe you could put up the slide. I think there's a couple of nuances here that I want to make sure that are brought to the board's attention as you consider this. Yeah. So we can go the third slide, please. As you discuss this, I would ask you to keep in mind two big questions here. And the first one is, are pre-existing non-conforming restaurants able to apply to this program? And I'll share some numbers with you in a moment. So just if you can park that question for a moment. The other outstanding question that we have for you and would really welcome your guidance here is, how should we address tents, right? Tents are a complicated issue in the code and sort of the superseding state code that, creates a different set of rules and pathways for people to make applications. So the broad question here is, we have lighting, which Rick addressed, we have music, which Rick addressed, and then we have tents, which, I'm bringing up now. In each of those first two instances, lighting and music, the piece of legislation that is, being considered by you all here today basically takes the approach that there are pre-existing sections of code that address that, and we're not going to attempt to use this piece of legislation to in any way affect those existing standards around lighting and noise. We think those, people can love those sections, they can hate those sections. If they want to see an amendment to that section, that's great, but let's have a conversation about lighting if we need to have a conversation about lighting. Code gets more complicated when we create trap doors in other parts of the code where somebody can say, well, if you read the lighting section, that actually doesn't apply to me because I've got a whole nother chapter over here that, gives me a different way into having a set of permissions that are attached to lighting. So the rationale was keep it simple. Lighting should be in lighting, go for an administrative permit. Noise gets handled as noise or music gets handled as music. Please address those accordingly. The question where, the committee sort of wrestled with itself a little bit surrounded tents. And should we apply that same logic and standard of we have an existing tent code? And some of the feedback we got was people are frustrated with the tent code. And my consistent response, and I think the consistent response we got out of the town attorney's office was, we understand that you may have frustrations around the tent code, but let's address that through the tent code. And so the compromise position that emerged from the committee was, let's bring this to our fellow agencies around the town, the building department, the fire marshal, and code enforcement, and see what feedback they had. I've heard already from Kevin and from Ann, and they each said very clearly, please don't create a trapdoor, as it were, in the code that would, allow us to have a different way to think about or administer permits for tents. I tried to catch up to Buzzy. He's a busy guy, right? I just haven't had a chance to connect with him yet. I assured each of them that this was just work session today. There would be opportunity for further comment. But I really wanted you all to look at those two questions. I'll come back to the pre-existing non-conforming in a second. The highlights here, so this slide and the next slide, these are really just a bullet point list of the pieces that you've discussed already. Annual permit, doesn't trigger site plan, items that are included in site plans already that are adopted and approved have to be upheld. This does not give you a way to get out from under any constraints that are already baked into a site plan. The 100% of seating we've talked about, the 75% we talked about, lighting we talked about. Importantly here, after the planning department administers this permit application process, if there is anything in your application that would trigger a building permit, putting down flagstone, adding a gravel patio, or not patio, it's not a good word to use, I apologize, sort of seating area, anything that's going to trigger a building permit requires that you in a second step would then go seek and receive a building permit before this permit is active. No bars outside, no outside food prep. Inside space, just as we did with the pilot program, can be used for either seating 100%. So conceptually here, somebody could have 100% of their head count set up inside, and they could have different furniture that allows them to set up 100% of their head count outside. And they can use, and so this is an enforcement question, right? They can use percentages of each. They could use half inside, half outside. They could do all of that. And that becomes an enforcement issue. It was made clear to us by the restaurant owners here that the furniture that you would use outside is not the same furniture that you would use inside. The raw logistics of moving back and forth just aren't practical. So if we're going to go with 100% of being able to move from inside to outside, you have to have that flexibility of owning both. And that really does add an additional enforcement criteria here, because the temptation will be obvious on a beautiful July 4th weekend to do some business inside as much as you can and do some business outside. So I want to underline for you all that as you consider this, that will be an issue that we will need to deal with. Inside space alternatively can be used, turned over to being used for takeout orders if they so choose. We already talked about gravel and flagstone, et cetera, but nothing that requires footings. That's sort of where we drew the line. There's use, and this is important. I would ask you all to pay attention to this, please, as you consider this. Use of adjoining properties is allowed with the written permission of the adjoining property owner, but what you can't do is exceed 100% of the capacity. So this is where you have right-of-way issues, where potentially it's a town-owned right-of-way or a state-owned right-of-way, or maybe you have a private property next door, let's say a retail use that has a little bit of space in front of it where you could put one of your additional tables. If you can work out that agreement, this piece of legislation as currently envisioned allows you to actually have a formal agreement that would need to be submitted to the town and part of your application, and actually allow you to use that space. So there's a third question there that you all may want to consider in detail. No use of parking areas. As we said, noise and light must be contained. Screening and mitigation can be required. ADA standards must be met. We already talked about timing, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. And music, again, is subject to the already existing applicable chapters and outdoor heaters. So if we can go back up to the two questions that are posed on, I believe it's slide 3, talking about pre-existing non-conforming. I just want to share some numbers with you all for how this breaks down. In Wainscott, we actually have only 3 restaurants. We pulled all the numbers here for each of the hamlets. Wainscott has 3 restaurants. Some of them may be applicable for this program. None of them are pre-existing non-conforming. So that would not be an issue. East Hampton has 2 restaurants, outside the incorporated village. East Hampton has 6 restaurants, 2 of which are considered pre-existing non-conforming, Bostwick's and Moby's. Bostwick's in this case, on the highway, actually would not be considered pre-existing non-conforming based on their classification as a takeout restaurant here. And the need for, all the stipulations that are in place for no table service, whether that's actually how they're operating now is a separate conversation. So they would actually be allowed to continue to operate. Springs has 7 restaurants, 0 of which would be considered pre-existing non-conforming. Amagansett has 12 restaurants, 5 of which are considered pre-existing non-conforming. But interestingly, if you go case by case, none of those would actually get scooped up by this piece of legislation in terms of, would pre-existing non-conforming restaurants be allowed to apply? So really what this all comes down to is Montauk. No surprise. You have 43 restaurants in Montauk, 4 of which are considered pre-existing non-conforming. For various reasons, you have 2 restaurants, Rushmeyer's and Crow's Nest, that would be considered pre-existing non-conforming and would therefore be how you would, scoop up or not scoop up based on the decision that the board will need to.
Jeremy, just to be clear, the pre-existing non-conforming, that's regarding use, right? That doesn't have to do with any kind of dimensional inadequacies, lack of parking, or anything like that. We're talking strictly about the fact that the zoning code does not allow that use in that district and that location, except for the fact that existed prior to the adoption of zoning, therefore is grandfathered in. Correct?
Mr. Supervisor, that is 100% correct. So apologies for making this complicated, but I can make it very simple for you. The question that you all are being asked to consider for pre-existing non-conforming really deals with 3 locations around town: Moby's, Crow's Nest, and Rushmeyer's.
Jeremy, I have a question on the use permission of adjoining properties. Is that limited to adjoining commercial properties, or I would think that wording needs to be in there?
It is not currently in there. I think that's a good edit for people to consider and potentially add.
Yeah, that would be that would be the intention. We wouldn't be intending to allow use of residentially zoned land adjoining the restaurant. So we may
probably just spell that out. Simple addition.
Yeah. So with that aspect, with that section, that one raised my feather a little bit, because there are properties that are residential that are used for commercial restaurants right now. I would be more comfortable if it was an adjoining property owner that was within the same ownership group than allowing a retail space now to put in, a restaurant over them. If it right of ways, yes, that was within what the state executive orders allowed. I think those work very well, actually. Using this, the state right of ways or some of the town right of ways. Using adjoining properties, I think gets to be a little bit of a slippery slope right now, then too, and how we can roll it back. Is it a backdoor into planning and zoning on there? Right now, backdoor into planning, into parking or septic constraints on the other properties on there. I would have to think about that a little bit more. The only other thing about this is, I know initially in the initial pilot it was about vegetation, is that any vegetation would have to be reviewed also within what was either previously allowed or what what the permitting process would think would be sufficient or appropriate then too. Those are a couple of my quick thoughts.
So David, just to clarify, you're saying if somebody was asking for additional vegetation for screening or whatever, you would want that to be articulated in the application?
Yeah, and also having a reviewing agency for that then too. Yes.
Okay.
I think the planning department, as this is set up, the planning department would take a look at that to see if the screening was adequate as part of the issuance of the permit, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it sounds like there are very few pre-existing non-conforming that are affected by this. Somewhat surprising, but I know that a number of restaurants that some folks thought were residentially zoned are actually neighborhood business within residential neighborhoods.
Right.
I guess going back to the tents, I can understand the reasoning behind not wanting to have some other section of code address tents in a way that allows for, as you described it, a trap door where the intent of the legislation on tents is somehow circumvented. One of the interesting things that I found out was that the issuance of tents, there's a inspection process required by the fire marshal to inspect the tents to make sure they comply with the New York State building and safety laws, fire and safety laws. And there's a reinspection requirement within the state law. I think it's every 10 days to make sure that the fastenings of the tent or whatever, are still secure and that things are still safe. So when we looked at, issuing a permit that would allow a tent to stay up for more than that 10-day period, that requires quite a bit more additional work on behalf of the fire marshals in terms of inspections. And so there was a lot of back and forth as to, well, should we extend the period beyond? Businesses are going to want some sort of certainty that they're going to be allowed to have a tent for the season before they make that kind of investment. So there's a little bit of an issue there. We're trying to figure out how we're going to resolve that, how we're going to deal with that.
So one of the things, we're assuming in this legislation that we're out of COVID and that the experience that we're really gearing up for is outdoor dining. We're not, and tents are not an outdoor dining experience. That's an event experience. So if we're really talking about outdoor dining, I would say, I would do the tents as something separate. And if we need to change the tent code, then let's go there and not do it within this outdoor dining experience pilot program. It will certainly, the committee itself was not unanimous, what I'm just saying. So, but I do think that having, because they now have the ability to move, if it rains, you move back indoors, and we're not talking about a COVID situation. So I think the experience of dining outside is important, not within a tent. And I think the temptation to then double everything up is exacerbated by having tents.
So one of the other things, and I'm not a restaurateur and I'm not completely familiar with all Suffolk County Department of Health rules, but I guess is there a requirement that food be served, that there be like an umbrella or some sort of covering, or is that just food preparation outdoors? That is a question that I had. I recall there being some sort of health department regulations regarding that.
When you serve food? When you serve it, I don't understand the question.
Serving at a table without any covering, umbrella or tent outdoors, is that allowed under Suffolk County Department of Health? Or is it just the preparation of food that has to have that covering if you're outdoors? The actual preparation. I just recall there being some sort of regulation about that came up once in the past.
I believe it's just the preparation of food.
Okay.
We can double check though. Yeah. I mean, clearly we want, whatever we're proposing, we want to make sure we're complying with county.
And
I see the logic.
Don't want to be out in the sun either. I mean, this in summertime it can be hot, you can get a sunburn.
But this doesn't affect having umbrellas. You can have an umbrella and that's fine. It does not. In fact, it states it in the code.
And I have to say that I agree with Sylvia's logic about the tent situation. I think that gets addressed separately. And if
Right.
folks need shade for where they're setting up their outdoor tables, umbrellas can serve as shade.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, just the two. Yeah, with the tents, I do agree that with what Sylvia was just stating, but also as far as codifying this fully in the code, I would be more interested in seeing this be a reoccurring annual admin permit also for right now then too. It's been a lot of changeovers, and I think that'd be appropriate to see, and we can keep addressing it. But what this does now, it at least gets people ready to move forward for this upcoming season. And then we can continue to do it quicker every year too.
So is there any consensus about whether or not we should make this a pilot program or just seek to make it an ongoing?
So if we do it, obviously, if we put a sunset clause in, we have to hear it now, and then if it sunsets at the end of the year, we're hearing it again, right, in 2023?
Well, we can do it for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is what I would suggest we do it for 2 or 3 years, partly because, the restaurants are going to make an investment as well.
Right.
So I want to make sure that their investment is amortized. And I'm sure that we're going to take some of these and codify them as we see it. So unfold, over the 2 or 3 or 4 years, however long you guys think is appropriate. I mean, I'd probably do 3 years.
I would agree with that, Sylvia. I think that's appropriate.
So just two points I want to make sure you're thinking of as part of this. There was a point made earlier in the conversation, I think it was by Councilwoman Rogers, that said, is there a way to basically use this piece of legislation to provide only some of the maximum 100%, for example? Is there some way to not do everything that's allowed in the permit? And the short answer is no, right? I don't see how our department using this draft could offer somebody, based on a legitimate concern on our part about total square area or something, I don't see how we could do anything other than apply common sense and say, look, you have to live within an appropriate, footprint that's agreed upon by the fire marshal. And maybe that's the backstop here. But we don't have any ability. It's binary. We either issue the permit or we don't issue the permit. So the reason I bring that up in this context is the second point. We may find that a pilot program over a couple of years gives us enough time to get comfortable with that full 100%, or make a determination about, on average, we find that being able to put 80%, 75%, 50%, whatever the right number is outside actually works better.
Well, I think you just said it though, Jeremy. Wouldn't we be going to the fire marshal and Buzzy's department would be saying, okay, so here they have 500 square feet, and this is how many people you can sit at tables. That's given, and they can't, whether that's 50% of their seating or 100% of their seating, they can't go beyond that. So wouldn't that be your guardrail?
It is a guardrail, but you may find, or we may find, that it is not the only guardrail that we wish were in place. And so I'll make up a scenario where there's a large outdoor space behind a restaurant where they could put 100%, but the residentially adjoining property, which is, obviously zoned residential, doesn't appreciate that they have 100% of this volume in their backyard, rather than what would be a more appropriate 50 or 75%.
So what you're looking for us is going back to the PowerPoint, where what should that percentage be in residential areas? The PowerPoint has 75%. Do we think 75% is fair and makes sense, or do we want to do 50%?
I think the committee is comfortable with the two numbers that you've been presented, 75 in residential and 100 in commercial. But I think this is an additional sort of argument in favor of a multi-year pilot that allows us to adjust the dials at some point.
Just to be clear, when it says residential, it means that the property adjacent is zoned residential, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
No. That would be the property of the applicant. If the restaurant
have we decided whether or not we would even allow that on a pre-existing non-conforming use property, outdoor dining?
Right. That's right.
We have to consider whether we actually can do that. I think there's some could argue that would be an expansion of their existing use, that they had indoor dining, but wait, now you've got all of it outside on the lawn. That's an expansion. They never had that before.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that.
I mean, the intent, as I understood it, was that if you were in a allowable zone, neighborhood business or whatever, and you're in a residential neighborhood, your neighbors are residential properties, that you need to take that into consideration, and that you would be reduced in the total amount of outdoor because of that, and that you need to screen it, etc., for sound and light.
So
Yeah, go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Well, I mean, as Jeremy's very good PowerPoint indicated, that one of the outstanding questions here, which obviously we're looking for guidance from you on, is whether or not this would apply to any non-conforming restaurants. And we learned apparently that there only are 3. But the 75% figure isn't just if the restaurant were zoned residential, which would mean it's just straight non-conforming use, but also a neighbored business. And in the LBO. Now, LBO is on the underlying zoning is residential, but a restaurant in a neighborhood business zone, and that's a legal use in a neighborhood business zone, that would be limited under the current draft. That would be limited to no more than 75% of the indoor capacity being moved outdoors.
Correct.
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Question, if I may. What about these restaurants holding special events? If there's 60 seats outside and they decide to have an engagement party or a wedding, a special event, is there any language that says they still would have to go before the special events committee for an additional permit?
There's no language, but I think you raise a really good point. My recommendation would be that we don't attempt to interrupt that application, the necessity for or the adjudication of that permit. So in other words, somebody would still have to go get a permit and would be fully compliant with those permit review standards and all of that.
Right. So
It's really based on the nature of the use. If it's not just the general public dining outdoors, if you're having a wedding, that's a special event, whether you use
I don't know. I mean, if
outdoor space or not.
Well, if you're closing your business to have a wedding, I don't know if you wouldn't need to go for a special event permit unless you wanted, outdoor amplified music past 9 o'clock and or you wanted a tent, then that would trigger. But if you're a restaurant and you decide not to offer dinner service that evening because because somebody's using the restaurant for a wedding, you wouldn't need a special event.
We're not requiring a special event permit for somebody to hold a wedding at their restaurant.
Right.
Unless they're asking for a tent, unless they're asking for amplified music. One of those other triggers. I thought you were asking for that if it was outside the normal scope of whatever that business was, that required a special event, because it's not part of their ongoing regular business. David, do you have is that the correct interpretation of that or no?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor, that is the correct interpretation, is that if it's a use that's outside of the normal approved use at that site, they would need a special event permit to go ahead and do that.
So if it was a catering hall where that is the nature of their business, where they're holding weddings, et cetera, then they don't need a special events permit. But if it's a restaurant where the normal use of that property is for just serving the general public meals, then they would have to get a special event permit if they're doing anything outside of that activity, right?
Yes, in general, that's how I look at it. So I think you're accurate.
Well, that was a showstopper.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, David. I would want to look at the code with you, because I don't know if I'm a restaurant and I'm closing for the evening to have a wedding and nothing changes but what I normally do, except that it's a wedding I'm serving and not, dinner, and nothing else gets triggered. I don't ever recall getting a special event permit for a restaurant that is having a wedding and doesn't trigger a tent or amplified music after 9 o'clock. In the 8+ years that I've been doing this.
If they're only serving food, then sure, I would agree with that. It probably doesn't trigger it, but things that go along with the wedding, the tent, the amplified music,
dancing.
I just don't know if I've ever seen an application for a wedding at a restaurant that doesn't have one of those other triggers as part of it. Can you think of one that we've had that? has just been.
Then the trigger is the tent or the music. It's not the fact that it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever.
Well, I think that you have to, the fact that the wedding use is typically includes all that, because how can you distinguish a wedding from just 100 people eating dinner if there's none of that other stuff? You can't.
I think you can. That's Kathy's point.
And so that's, I think it has to be looked at a case-by-case basis, but I think yeah, we do. But just to finish my thought, every wedding is going to have one of those other triggers, I think 99% of the time. And if they don't, then we won't require them to have a permit if it's just them eating dinner at a restaurant. And that's all that it is. I don't think that would trigger it, but I think that's unlikely.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
So have we resolved the other issue of pre-existing non-conforming? Whether this program would be available or not?
I mean, to me, in the strict interpretation of pre-existing non-conforming is you're not supposed to be able to expand that use. And I think moving beyond the confines of where that use exists is an expansion. I don't, that's the way I look at it, but I would, be willing to hear from others as to what they think, or the town attorney the attorneys on the line as to what they think about that.
I think it's
that's my understanding from my time on the zoning board. But
Peter, I think it's ambiguous enough under the code that we'll want to make it clear in the legislation one way or the other.
So are we looking to notice this on the 17th for a hearing in April? Is that the game plan? Can we just have a couple of days to mull this around and reach out to Jeremy and
we can
the town
double back
attorney's
on the
office?
15th.
Yeah.
We can have further discussion on the 15th, or
That'd be great.
give them.
Yeah, we can come back on the 15th if you've got any other changes that you want to talk about. And the business committee meets tomorrow, kind of as a special emergency session. We're meeting, we met last week, we'll meet this week, so that we can digest the conversation that we had today.
Great.
Okay. Well,
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Rick.
We'll look forward to further discussion, and thanks, Jeremy. Thank you, Rick.
Okay. Thank you all. Take care now.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye-bye.
Jeremy.
So that concludes our work session topics of discussion for today. We now have liaison reports. Kathy, do you have a liaison report for us?
I do, and more on special events. So at last week's public hearing on the proposed changes to the Chapter 151 of the Town Code for special event permits, there was comment about special event permits and noise pollution. So I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify the applicable sections of the Town Code. So Chapter 185 of the Town Code deals with noise and noise pollution. And as we actually mentioned earlier, 185-1 prohibits amplified speakers and music after 9 p.m. 185-3 sets forth the permitted noise standards in decibel levels. And under 185-4, there's an exception to the noise pollution regulations for special event holders. So under this exception, special event holders, permit holders, are allowed to have amplified speakers and music after 9 p.m. And as I said, the committee uses their discretion. I think the latest we go is 11 p.m. But however, there is no exception to go with outside the parameters of those decibel levels. So special event permit holders are still required to comply with the noise standards and decibel levels. And I just felt that after listening to public comment on Thursday, that needed to be clarified. And then when we were having our discussions last month about, the proposed changes to Chapter 151 for special event permits, we decided that we needed to really take a hard look at the peddling section of our code, which is Chapter 109. So at next Tuesday's work session, Assistant Town Attorney David McMaster and I will propose potential changes to that peddling chapter, including refining the definition of peddler to ensure that it includes purveyors of beach services such as umbrellas and chairs and beach fires. Folks may have noticed that there's been some activity at the proposed site on 3 Mile Harbor Road for the affordable apartment project that's being done by the East Hampton Housing Authority. I just wanted to give a brief update. The Housing Authority has closed on that property and received the building permit, and there's a new process that's gone into place because of the long-eared bat. The DEC only allows clearing between December 1st and February 28th, but the Housing Authority did get an extension for that clearing, actually a 2-week extension, and they started clearing on March 1st so that that project can move forward. And then last night, the East Hampton CAC met, and we discussed the town's acquisition or soon-to-be acquisition for agricultural and open space purposes, the 12-plus acres on Cedar Street, which we've known as the Lilac Jezebel property. And I informed the CAC that that property was under contract and that the one-bedroom cottage would be utilized for farmer housing, and the ag barn and the converted garage will be used for ag purposes, because they had questions about that at last month's meeting. We also revisited the discussion about the Stephen Hands Path, Old Northwest Road and Cedar Street Triangle, and the CAC voted unanimously for the town to hire a traffic consultant to study and make recommendations to improve public safety at those intersections. And given that we're hiring engineers to design the roundabout at Stephen Hands Path, Long Lane, and Two Holes of Water, I'm proposing that we expand the scope of that project to include the intersections at Stephen Hands Path, Old Northwest Road, and Cedar Street, since it's a feeder into the roundabout. And that maybe we can, make some improvements there. And also, I've spoken to Steve Lynch. Maybe we can get the highway crew out there, because they did say that there was some vegetation that was blocking sight lines, so we could take care of that. And then when we were talking about the roundabout at Stephen Hands Path, Long Lane, and Two Holes of Water, the CAC commented that they want to just make sure that we're considering and addressing the flooding that takes place there, and make accommodations for bike lanes. There was also a very brief...
Kathy, can I just go into that one?
Yeah, sure.
So bike lanes are being accommodated based on the intersection change of 114 Stephen Hands Path, and a lot of those changes that the town is going to be encapsulating is going to be for drainage issues. So yes, both of those are being looked at as part of that corridor. And it's the appropriate timing to look at the other 2 intersections that you also discussed.
Yeah.
So I just want to let you know that I'm making sure that's happening.
And if I could add, one of the line of sight issues is if you're coming from Two Holes of Water, trying to up to Stephen Hands to either cross or turn onto Stephen Hands, and that property actually extends. The property boundary extends into that line of sight. So it might require seeking an easement from the property owner to have additional clearing to improve that sight line. I know they've been pretty good about trying to clear the right of way, but even just the right of way alone is probably not enough to solve the sight line issue.
Well, they're saying that there's sight line issues up by Old Northwest Road and Cedar Street. So I had spoken to Steve, and I was just going to follow up with him on that, which is great. And as far as the bike lanes, as I recall, when many years ago when Long Lane got reconstructed and repaved, bike lanes were put in. We've got bike lanes on 114, but there's no, connectivity between Long Lane and Route 114. So it'll be, I know that folks, that the bikers will be excited once we can get that all connected. The CAC also had a brief discussion on the Bistrian heliport and how that related to our discussions with the new airport. We also discussed, I brought up that we're having a public hearing on April 7th to changes to Chapter 167 of littering and dump control. and that those changes expand the definition of litter to include gravel, loam, dirt, and other debris, and prohibits drag out onto public roads. The CAC was unanimous in their support for these changes and will be sending a letter to the clerk to be part of the public record. And then lastly, the East Hampton CAC has been part of the Adopt a Highway program. They've adopted the south end of Springs Fireplace Road, and they've been meeting once a month to pick up the litter there. And I just want to commend them publicly for their public service. We're very grateful. So we're going to be meeting later this month on a Sunday to spend an hour or so cleaning up, picking up litter along Springs Fireplace Road. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy. David, you have a report for us?
I do, thank you. I wanted to let the residents know that the town is still committed to the Live Here, Work Here program, an initiative that the town has. There are many opportunities for staffing within town employment, full-time jobs to seasonal jobs also. With some of those seasonal jobs, the town of East Hampton is looking for seasonal employees in our parks and recreational departments, and our attendants, and instructors, lifeguards, in our enforcement ranks of TCOs, and also in our buildings and grounds departments as landscapers, and there are also others too. Also, we have many full-time positions also available. Please contact our Human Resources Department then too. Live here, work here. You don't have to commute. You can have a great job here with the town of East Hampton. You get to work with all of us. I also want to move on with what Kathy was saying. I'll just bring this forward a little bit. Some work that we're upcoming with our infrastructure and then working with a highway is Steve Lynch did inform me, and I let the Monotalk CAC know that Monotalk Highway Route 27 past Monotalk Village to Monotalk Point is still planning to be built and paved in April. This is funding that was secured by Assemblyman Thiel. It's supposed to be done last fall, but it's going to get done this spring, so I've been told. Also part of that right now is I know Sylvia and I have been outreached by planning is that the state DOT is looking to do their guide rail restoration projects in two areas, one being Wainscott, also one being Montauk. I'm pretty much downtown Montauk out there. Currently, if you look right now, they call them rustic guide rails, which is just painted brown, galvanized guide rails on wood backers. I would like to petition the state to go to their rustic guide rails, which would be wood with either metal or wood backing on them. And I think that would be more in touch with what our community standards are. There are in other locations that the state have put up, but I would like to move that forward, and that's my recommendation, is to have that request to them first right now instead of going to the metal galvanized ones that we see. So I mentioned that to the CAC last night, and Peter, I know you got the notice on that, so I hope if we can move that forward, we can continue to do that. Maybe they'll listen.
You certainly can make that request. The board agree that we would like to do that?
Yes, it came up in two different venues for me, yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter and Sylvia. I want to let everyone know as far as the road raising project that is at Second House Road and North Shore Road. There was a meeting recently between PSE&G and the town's engineering firms to find out what was installed and to get them ready for some conceptual designs and starting that engineering process. I don't expect hearing much for a couple more months, but I want to let them know that that is moving forward now that we accepted the proposal for engineering a while back, and there's been some meetings on site. As mentioned earlier, I did have a ride around with some of the crew foremen for highways out of Montauk. We looked at some habitual drainage issues that are in Montauk, also that are in the road right away, and also some issues that they have with, as we mentioned, drag out, improper fencing, and construction protocols on some projects that are in Montauk that are affecting our drainage capacities and other quality of life issues in some of the neighborhoods. And I want to thank the time for DPW or Public Works or Highway to work with me or take the time to let me know about that, and also thank Kevin Cooperner and his staff for getting out there and trying to get compliance on some of these other projects then too. The Skatepark Project, we have an on-site meeting starting this Friday. I anticipate mobilization of that project to happen in the next couple of weeks there. It's an exciting time right now. With that also, I want to let the board know that we have removed the 2 old non-functional scoreboards that were out at the Monotalk Lions field. They haven't worked in some time. But what we did not do is we did not remove the electrical conduiting. So we left all the electrical in place. I know I've been outreached by some members of the community for potential future scoreboards that might be fundraised for. So we left the electrical in place, but we did remove the old scoreboard. So that would be a change that you'll see out there at the Lions Field area. Also staying within recreation, we have installed new signage at the, they're installing at the Wainscott Green and also at the Buckskill Meadows. At the Buckskill Meadow Preserve Park right now, we're looking to finalize installation of some bollards, chess sets, and it'd be nice to have a formal opening of that potentially by the end of next month and to for that wonderful park public space that we have moved on, this board has moved on, and it's about to open up. And land management, I want to again thank land management, Scott Wilson and his land stewards, and also Laura Tuman from CCOM, and Tom Dess. I had a conversation with Tom Dess actually just this week about the felling of the trees in that peak. That has all been completed. The tree fellers felled over 1,300 trees in just about a week's and a half time frame. Mostly you'll see it on the south side by the State Park beach driving put on. But you also can see on the north side, I see it because I stare at it all the time. If you're driving 55, you probably won't, but it happened. The trees are down, and hopefully with some of the cold weather that we had in January or February, it might suppress some of the expanded areas of the southern pine beetles. State Parks, Tom Dess, who's the manager of the Monotalk State Parks, told me that they're continuing to do drone flybys. They have seen it in other areas of the same preserve, and also getting to Hither Hills. And they're sending out quick reaction teams to try to suppress it as best they can then too. But it has moved on, and hopefully the work that had been done, and I thank this board for supporting that work, it stops it for the time being. We won't be able to see that until the season goes, but again, that work has been completed. Also part of Nature Preserve and Land Management, I would like to notice for public hearing for April, maybe last week April, the Gold Dart and the Fresh Ponds Meadows management plans. I'll resend to the board for your review, and we can get that for the public's discussion on that. But also the other management plan being for Amagansett Plains, I'll be prepared to send that around and have another board discussion for any changes of that prior to any potential noticing a public hearing. But the other two I think are pretty sound enough to move forward. So please just give me your comments when you get that email from me. I want to thank portions of our beach committee and also our wonderful Gabriella Gallier here, Town Hall, for assisting with our redesigning of some of our beach signs. We're getting very close to implementation of that, using QR codes on these beach signs, putting together all the information that we need to address, but in a very tight package compared to all the signs that are out there right now. We are on a very good time frame to have that implemented by the summer season or by Memorial Day season right now too. Also, along with that, we got some comments back from our disabilities advisory board about the designs of our 88 beach mats. Again, I think we got mentioned they wanted more of a T section at the bottom of them. So we have redesigned those proposals. I'll resend those out to the board also. And we're working with Natural Resources at Buildings and Grounds for those placements at certain locations in the town of East Hampton. Again, I think we're in a good position to have those implemented for the summer season. In our fisheries right now, I want to let everyone know that the State Department of Environmental Conservation at their next Emra Marine Resources meeting, which is Wednesday, March 16th. It's a public meeting from 6 to 8 p.m. They're taking public comments on the Atlantic State, Coastal States Marine Resources. They're scheduling public hearings to address Atlantic striped bass amendment number 7. They're gonna this one for Emra is going to be on March 16th. They also have another one in New Paltz on March 23rd. And there's also ways to comment online then too if you have any questions or concerns about the striped bass changes that they're looking to implement. They need to be in by April 15th. You can check the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council's website for other ways to contact them then too, or the DEC. I also want to let everyone know that the Peconic Baykeeper is having a river herring and eel monitoring workshop that is happening on Wednesday, March 9th, tomorrow, from 5 to 6:30 p.m. via Zoom. And anyone's interested in that, please contact the Peconic Baykeeper's website. Also, related to our slips committee is that I have been in contact. Carol was with us, and we would like to bring back for. I know this has been taking about a decade, but this is our year, everyone. The Marine Refueling Conversation. Plan on hearing that back from me in April. Hopefully, any of those changes can be made and be ready to be implemented by the summer season also. I took a meeting this morning, a quick one. I only had a certain time on it, last minute meeting, that we're still working with our engineering firms to come up with conceptual plans for updating and advancing the Camp Hero septic systems out there. So that's still moving forward. I am working again with Natural Resources and Tom Rule on that. So it is progress, and there's nothing necessary to bring out right now, but there is progress still being made. As mentioned earlier, the Administrative Bureau is still making progress right now. We look forward to make some of these final announcements on this in the upcoming weeks ahead right now, in which we will be looking to hire staff and get all the processes in place. And still, I think we are on track to be ready and prepared for that by the summer season with any code changings upcoming also. On Friday, I had a meeting with the Water Quality Technical Advisory Committee. It was an internal meeting. Again, I think we got 12 applications in. The internal meeting was reviewing some of that, and we will be looking to have the meeting of the whole committee. I believe that's happening on the 16th, and we will be meeting our timeframes on there for the recommendations for funding for our last RFA that we had. So that will be upcoming. I believe we're going to be targeting the end of April for that too. The supervisor and myself had a discussion with Southampton Hospital about their construction plans setting forward. They let us know that the Panago fields will not be the Panago site will not start construction until after this Little League season, and I moved that forward to the Little League board also, knowing that they can schedule games at the Panago fields for this upcoming season. They'll start the construction almost immediately after that then too, and we can let them have that knowledge there. That's important also because we had to let Buildings and Grounds know for their maintenance schedule there too. I had the Monotalk CAC meeting last night. One of the first things that came up, which is great, and I haven't been there. I have to thank Jane D'Souza, who helps run the Monotalk Library with my passports for my family. She was great, absolutely great, and I got them back in a real quick time. So just to let everyone know, there's an option there. The new Monotalk Library is open. I have not been there. I can't wait to go there. It was a big change, a needed change. There have been great rave reviews from some of the people at the CAC last night. Then too, they had their archives area, which sounds fascinating, in which they could look back into the history of Monotalk and the persons and actions that they had. So I invite everyone to go see the new Monotalk Library. It is going to be a font of knowledge for future generations right now. And this generation, to go there to find some quiet time reading, contemplating, and do some educational research. So I really look forward to going out there, and I welcome everyone to go there. And I thank the Monotalk Library and their board of trustees, I believe, for moving that forward, and the community of Monotalk for approving the funding for that too.
I know they're having a formal ribbon cutting on May 22nd, Sunday the 22nd.
Even better. Great. Yeah.
Big news, though.
So the Monotalk CAC meeting last night on Zoom, We had a report from the Monotalk Beach Subcommittee, which they're going to forward me the email questions, concerns about using revenue that was gained in Monotalk for greater use for garbage pickups, beach patrolling, beach rake services. This has come up. I haven't reviewed it fully, but this is only verbally. I think an email has just come into me. They also want to see the junior lifeguarding program brought back to Ditch Plains, but again, that is determination of the chief lifeguard. I look forward to going through that email and responding and passing it on to the board members. The airport subcommittee gave a report there and discussion. I also brought up all of our scoping sessions that we are doing with the town of East Hampton, the PPR that was presented, make sure that the residents would go out and just, go to the town's website, read through this, and see how the town is progressing. There was a passed resolution last night that by the Monotalk CAC that I think should go into our scoping reports. I will send that into it. It read as such: the Monotalk CAC recommends that the town board aggressively pursue the purchase of the Monotalk Airport with the aim of giving the town board the same control over its operations as they will have when the East Hampton Airport reopens as a private airport. However, if the East Hampton Town Board cannot successfully negotiate a purchase of the Monotalk Airport, the Monotalk CAC requests that the town make every possible effort to engage the owners in negotiations to ensure that the Monotalk Airport is operated in a manner no less restrictive than the new private East Hampton Airport will be, including but not limited to working with the owners to maintain the same operating hours as those of the East Hampton Airport. The motion passed not unanimously, but it did pass, and I think that's something that I will move forward into our scoping documents also then too for further discussion. Let me see. That was primarily the discussions that we had besides my liaison report there. They were checking in also about some of the movements on any of the parking restrictions. I let them know that I'm moving with the drafting. I moved to draft the language on that and looking at some of the procurement options that we have, some of those, and that the town board will continue those discussions also. And again, that I know Councilwoman Rogers has started the survey work for the beaches in Monotalk to accommodate the Army Corps of Engineers contract that we have for some potential for beach nourishment in place in that area for the downtown stabilization project that has to be completed by May 15th. So summer is on the way and there's a lot of work to be done. That is my liaison report, and I thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you, David. Sylvia, do you have a report for us?
I do. So the business committee met last March 2nd. And Robert Ross is the first person to give us a report about COVID and the different hospitals within our area. Southampton Hospital, as of March 2nd, had 4 COVID patients. One was in ICU. Stony Brook Hospital had 25 COVID patients and 5 were in ECU, and Eastern Long Island had none. The last week of February, Southampton Hospital ranged from 3 to 9 patients at that hospital. March 31st is their last day of vaccines at Southampton Hospital, and just wanted people to be aware. And, as Robert Ross said, we are seeing it wind down, but it's still devastating to those who are in the hospital. They had 2 deaths this past week. So just a reminder that it's not quite over and to be cautious. We also talked about the outdoor dining pilot program, which you heard the presentation today. So I won't go into that again. There was one question about the events permit. Paul Monty had 3 things that he wanted to relay to the town board. That did we know how much insurance would cost between the 1 million and 2 million, what that would add for a restaurant or a caterer to be able to supply that, which I don't think is, I don't know. And he didn't have the answer to that either.
Sylvia, if I may, we've been, even though the code said 1 million, we've been asking for 2 million. So they've been providing $2 million worth of their certificate of insurance.
Right. Paul, the chair, Paul Monti, was concerned about the longer deadline periods that were in the code, but he didn't seem to have, he was concerned, but he didn't seem to think it was onerous, as long as there was a way for them, and there is within this code to still apply, even if you don't meet the deadlines. And there was one thing he picked up, and Kathy, you may be able to help with this as well. Approved, it says that, you have to have an approved site plan. What's an alternative if your business doesn't have an approved site plan?
David, you want to respond to that, or?
Sure. So it's just for the businesses that do. I mean, obviously, we know that there's businesses out there that don't have site plan. It makes it easier for the committee to streamline what the approved use is and assess whether a special event permit is actually necessary for the particular applicants in question. So I would just say that those applicants that have approved site plans most likely know that they have approved site plans and can submit them. Those that don't obviously are not, that they're not prohibited from applying or anything. It just requires more research on the special event committees and to look into what the approved use at that location is.
Okay.
And obviously, if you're, like, for instance, the Montauk Chamber of Commerce uses the Montauk Green, for their farmers markets, their fall festival and whatnot. And since that's, public property, there's no site plan needed, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that. The Wainscott Hamlet Study Working Group also met last Wednesday night. And I'll just give kind of the three things that it boiled down to. And as an aside, I'll go with the guide rails that David was talking about. They are aware of those, and they would like them to be the rustic wood guardrails. Sorry, I said guide rails. Guardrails that are on 27. So the three issues that it kind of boiled down to was they think walkability is important, that decreasing the speed limit of Montauk Highway through that area is important, whether you do it through traffic calming scenarios, a heavier treescape that would make it seem as you're coming into a separate area. Sidewalks were also important. And the last thing was parking. They would like to see perhaps a municipal parking lot that would help take some of the pressure off of other businesses that are in the area. So we're still working. Obviously, we still have at least 2 more meetings to go with this group. And we're lucky to have Jeremy as also Samuelson from the director of our planning department has also been very instrumental. And actually his whole department has been working on different aspects of the Wainscott Hamlet study. So, something more definitive will come up, but we're still working on these meetings, and thank everyone who participates in them. They've been great. So big thank you to Kate Rogers, who was the Wainscott CAC liaison this past Saturday. She took that on, and I appreciate, I know there was a lot of feedback that she'll be able to give you about the airport, about, other issues, the South Fork wind and other things that come up regularly at that meeting. So a big thank you to Kate. And in a conversation that I had with Kate was kind of the information that SECRA is not well understood by a lot of folks, and that we need to perhaps have a meeting, dedicated section of our next work session on just SECRA. Jeremy Samuelson has said he would do that. Kate was kind enough to, I think she emailed everybody the SECRA cookbook that is a simplified version of what SECRA means and what it does. I know all of us that have been on either zoning or planning have looked through it and seen it and have tried to understand it. It is, as I said, a simplified version of what the attorneys look at. but it's helpful in understanding the steps. And it's not only that the town board uses SECRA, but zoning boards use SECRA, planning boards use SECRA. And I think it's important for the community to understand what it is and what we're looking at. We've heard the words a lot at probably every meeting, but I think understanding what it is and having Jeremy present it, I think will be helpful. And so next Tuesday, we will have a SECRA presentation on what it really means and what our obligation is, not only as sitting on different boards, but the obligation of the community to participate in a SECRA document. So I look forward to that. And I thank Kate again for just bringing that up and making sure that we get that information to the community. Also, David McMaster is working on the clearing restrictions. It's a very simple, straightforward piece. Go look at that next Tuesday as well. So these restrictions would require a building. If you're going for a building permit, you have to have it state where the clearing would be on your property. So there's no moment where you can say, sorry, we didn't know that. We want to make that, we want to call Kevin Cooper out as little as possible so that he can concentrate on other issues. And that is my report.
Thanks, Sylvia. Kate, do you have a report for us today?
Yes, I do. And I was going to start with CARP, and I'm going to, because that's the order that I went to the meetings at. But in order for continuity, I'll start with the Wayne Scott CAC report. The meeting was very well attended. There were 47 people on the call, not only from Wayne Scott, but from other areas in the town as well. First, I'll just start with Sylvia. You had sent them the information on the guardrail proposals, and they will support you in your efforts to have that be rustic wood rather than the steel. And large Kelvin lights, very, very bright lights, very hot lights. It was a very good presentation and very well received by the Wayne Scott CAC. Let's see. And turning to the airport discussion, and the meeting was 4 hours, and the majority of the time was at the airport discussion. And I did speak to Sylvia that there was a lot of confusion among folks and misinformation of where we are in the process, and that we are in a scoping part of a SECRA process. And this is all mandated by the state. And most people were under the impression that the set of PPRs that were discussed at a previous work session were final and written in stone. And I put up the SECRA presentation from the February 15th work session, and that presentation is still on our website under town board materials, and that's for the February 15th meeting, and walked everyone through the SECRA process, and again, emphasized the importance right now of sending in public comments. I did receive an outline of the meeting that listed from Carolyn Gluck that listed the issues that were discussed regarding the airport and the proposed PPR framework. And the issues had to do with whether a higher bar needed to be set, loopholes that they foresaw, and that they have a number of questions. And David, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do have a question regarding submissions. I know right now we have a dedicated website, which I'll bring up in a minute. But if we receive comments to our town email addresses, do we need to reply to people to please send them to the dedicated airport scoping email address to be included in the scoping session, or can we forward those to that email?
Let me look into that and get back to you. I think that it would probably be fine to forward it, but I don't want to give you the wrong advice. So let me just confirm that with John.
Yeah, I appreciate it, so that we know what to do if we're receiving comments directly, and we can reply in the proper way. So I appreciate that. So there is a lot of still, and I know this is true with every project that we have, a lot of misinformation that's sent out, that's swirled around. So I'm really happy to see that we will have a discussion on the secret process. So folks understand that this is a legal state mandated process and there's particular steps that we're following, that the PPR suggestions that we put forth were presented as part of a study of PPRs or restrictions that we will be doing over the summer as part of the CEQA process, and nothing at this point is written in stone. So I just want to emphasize that again, as I did at the meeting. And the public is happy to be engaged, although, people have been engaged for 15 years and there is fatigue as usual. And I told them, the town board, the town has been engaged also for quite a long time on putting in meaningful restrictions or eliminating noise for folks that are impacted by the noise. So we're all still working on this together as a community. I will say right now that the email address to submit comments on the proposed PPRs for the scoping document as part of the CEQA process to determine what we're going to study this summer is ehamptonny.gov. And I'll repeat that as much as I can. There's a deadline for the submissions of March 18th at 4 p.m. So please send your submissions to ehamptonny@ehamptonny.gov. The last part of the meeting was questions regarding South Fork Wind Farm. Any of those questions or comments I sent directly to the team at South Fork Wind myself. And as soon as I get those replies, I'll be sending them back to the folks that requested them at the Wainscott CAC. One comment was on traffic control and the long period of stoppage that's going on up on Wainscott Northwest Road, where the trenching is happening currently. And I've spoken to the team up at South Fork Wind to come up with better ways of managing the traffic in that area. Our roads may look like country roads, but they're heavily trafficked and people need to get to work, and a 10-minute delay is not okay. So just for the public's knowledge, they are continuing trenching on Wainscott Northwest Road up by the police station traveling south. So if you can take an alternative route, that might save you some time and aggravation. The wind farm construction of the export cable, the trenching under the road is continuing through the next 2 or 3 weeks, and has begun this week also at the alternative southern end. Besides Northwest Road, Northwest Wainscott Road at that end traveling south, has begun at Beach Lane traveling north. So we'll be keeping our eye on that construction. If you have any questions about what's happening with South Fork Wind, you can go to their website at southforkwind.com. And if you have any issues, questions, comments, please send an email to info@southforkwind.com. CC me on my town email address, which is crogers@ehamptonny.gov, so that I can see that responses are timely and I can look at what the responses are and follow up if need be. My other meeting last week, since our last work session, was a first meeting for this year of the Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Plan Committee, commonly known as CARP. This is a codified committee that was formed to fulfill a grant study to assess our coastal resiliency. The study was completed, and the committee at this first meeting discussed implementation and also taking a review of the plan itself to see if there needs to be any update to the plan with the goal of the plan being formally adopted in the future by the town. And also to look at implementations that may be available as parts of the plan, depending on what grants, to coincide with grant availability for 2022. So we want to make sure we don't miss any grant opportunities that are available out there. I know the county spoke to Legislator Bridget Fleming, and I know the county just got a little over $1 million to assess some of their properties and work on their resiliency. So while we're evaluating the plan for adoption, we also would like to proceed with just looking at what grants are available and what work can be done. Let's see what else I have. I just want to talk about the makeup of this committee, which is Natural Resources Director, Planning Director, members of both departments, also with the New York State staff, county staff, representatives from the trustees here, Francis Bach, the clerk of the trustees. It's co-chaired by Allison Branco, who is the coastal director of the Nature Conservancy. And also the other co-chair is Lord Tuman, who's president of CCOM, Concerned Citizens of Montauk. Ramesh Das is also on the committee, and he is the chair of the Waterfront Advisory Committee and author of the LWRP. And the supervisor was also on the call, and I thank Peter for that as well. And I think this is a powerhouse committee that will get good work done on resiliency, coastal resiliency, which is critical to us all living here in town. And that is my report. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I have two announcements quickly. Sorry. I have the Energize East Hampton free home efficiency webinar is taking place on March 15th at 6:30 p.m. And there are many utility and New York State incentives and rebates that New York State subsidized low interest long-term loans that are available. So please join our home efficiency experts to learn about ways of making your home more affordable while lowering your utility bills. The webinar is free, and you can get information and register at our energizeeh.org website. The final thing that came in just a little while ago to me was another Meet the Authors Night, which will take place on Wednesday, March 16th at Ashua Hall, 6 p.m. Admission is free. And this month's Meet the Author is Randy Lorden, an award-winning mystery writer known for her popular Sidney Sloan series. Her most recent mystery, She's Dead, Who Cares?, takes place in East Hampton and sounds like a wonderful wonderful novel to read, and more exciting to have the author read from her latest book. And that is my report.
Thanks, Kate. That's a great title, by the way. Yeah, so I'll start off with the COVID update. So we have had a drastic reduction in the number of positive cases. We now have a total of 3 positive cases in the last 3 weeks, out of 206 people tested over the last 3 weeks, with a 1.4% positivity rate. This is continuing to be encouraging news. As a result, I know the governor has a suspension of the open meetings law, which allows us to have remote meetings and to allow people to call in to town board meetings. That provision is up the 15th of March, and not sure that the governor will renew that, or if it will be necessary to renew that. And so the town board will be discussing about when to resume in-person meetings, but I think that's going to be very soon. I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing the public in person. It's been a long haul these last 2 years, and the remote meetings have afforded us to be able to continue the work of the government and to engage with the general public in a way that keeps everyone safe. And we have actually seen greater engagement because of the convenience of calling in. The number of people participating in our town board meetings has actually been greater, but I think the time has come that we will need to be going back into in-person meetings. There is legislation proposed that would allow for hybrid meetings and amendments to the open meetings law to facilitate that. And we look forward to seeing that legislation make its way through the state legislature and get approved. But for now, we'll be remote probably at least for the next meeting or so, and then look forward to going back into in-person meetings. The Town Property Management Committee meeting yesterday was well attended. We had a discussion about Brooks Park at the top of the meeting and Carl Fisher House. The recommendation on Brooks Park is that we need to get an updated cost of restoration from Drew Bennett. He did an updated structural report which confirmed the very deteriorated state of the structures. We have concerns about them. They're cordoned off for safety's sake, but due to vandalism and the ravages of weather and time, they're not in very good shape, and we really need to make a decision as a town board about path forward. So I would ask that you authorize Drew Bennett to do an updated cost of restoration based on his most recent structural report, and that will allow us to make a sound decision about how to move forward. I will mention that there has been some growing interest in the preservation of Brooks Park. There was an event held there, a gathering, I think maybe 150 people attended in support, and just looking at the property and the surrounding 11 acres, it is a trail connection through that property as well. And so with the growing interest and an organization not for profit being formed, we may be finally at a point where we can move forward on restoration. We heard from a couple of members of the Monotalk Historical Society discussion about Carl Fisher House. As you know, we have a temporary management agreement with them that authorizes them to use that building for office use. The fire marshal has approved office use. More needs to be done prior to opening the building up for public assembly purposes as a museum. And so that work is ongoing. And we are also finalizing a permanent, long-term management agreement as well. There was a good deal of discussion about Boys and Girls Harbor, the pavilion, bathrooms, and ADA accessible path, which the committee is very excited about. We went through a number of different designs that the pavilion might be, and I just want to screen share one really quickly here with you. This is what the committee arrived on. It's a very simple pavilion structure made of steel and with a metal roof. It would be extremely low maintenance and would last quite a long time. And again, that pavilion is proposed to take to be sited at the area where the existing the old basketball courts, really more of a parking lot now, on that disturbed portion immediately adjacent to the large field area. The park consists of about 57 acres and leads all the way down to 3 Mile Harbor, the west side of 3 Mile Harbor. It's the site of the former Anthony Duke's Boys and Girls Harbor summer camp location, where generations of inner city children got to experience the great outdoors here in East Hampton. That project is very much going to expand the community's accessibility improvements in terms of having a pathway that can be used for everyone from strollers to wheelchairs to cyclists and pedestrians as well. I will say that the work recently completed at the Trunzo Preserve off Buckskill Road is a wonderful half-mile ADA accessible pathway, and part of the town's ongoing efforts to make various parks and buildings accessible to those with disabilities. Also, we discussed the Springs Library ADA accessibility improvements. The board is waiting to receive a memo from the ARB about compliance of those improvements with the historic designation within that area, within that district. This is really essentially a new brick walkway in addition to the existing brick walkway, and rebuilding of the handicap ramp around the side of the building and to the back, as well as reconfiguring the interior bathroom so that it is also ADA compliant. I don't expect there to be any issues with consistency with the historic district guidelines, as the existing walkway leading to the main entrance is also brick. The ADA accessible walkway, of course, will be set on a concrete base so that there won't be any irregularities, concerns about that. With regard to the airport, we continued to work constructively with the FAA to successfully complete all the necessary steps to open the new airport on May 19th. Significant progress has been made in terms of the number of items that the February 2nd letter from the FAA enumerated. I think we've pretty much gone through most of that list. I will have a resolution in just a few minutes to authorize the retention of flight tech by our outside consultants, Cooley, to develop special instrument procedures for the new airport. This third party will work directly with the FAA to design and get approved the special instrument procedures, which was one of the other outstanding questions that we needed to resolve. So, I'm very pleased to have that cooperative spirit working with the FAA to complete these various tasks in a timely way. And we expect to be moving forward and to be able to offer many, if not all, of the existing amenities that the airport currently enjoys. There was a discussion. Sylvia had asked me about a presentation for next Tuesday's work session about SECRA that's been discussed here by both Kate and Sylvia. I just want to again reiterate the fact that we do need the public's participation in the SECRA scoping process. And again, that email, you can send your comments about prior permission required regulations at the new airport to East Hampton Town Board at ehamptonscope@ehampton.gov. And we'll keep reiterating that. The comment period closes on March 18th at 4 p.m. And again, we want to have as many comments and input from the general public about this very important issue. And that's all I have. So at this point, we have a few resolutions to offer. Kathy, you're the first.
I do. 2022-343 is a notice to bidders EH22-013 food service and kitchenware items for our heating and nutrition program. The bid is available March 10th and due back March 24th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Resolution number 344 is a final reconciliation for the Manor House year 2021. There are a couple of corrections and additions to this one. So in the second whereas, the town collected a fee from the next word, the needs to be scratched out. The whereas underneath that, whereas the town was obligated to pay the common charges of any town-owned unit once, and then scratch out the word was. Everything else is down to the last resolved. It's resolved the supervisor is authorized to issue a check in the amount of $14,585.69 to the Manor House Condominium Association, representing the unpaid common charges on the Manor House condominium for the calendar year 2021, to be paid from account CM8681-58140 under contractual services, and be it further resolved that the following budget modification for the year 2022 is hereby approved. So it's from one budget line under sales of real property increased by $14,585.69. And contractual services, another budget line increased by $14,585.69.
Second is amended.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passed and carried.
Resolution 345 is to accept security and undertaking for an urban renewal parcel 9 in SP1-2. And it is for the applicant Clement DiCasio and Victoria Caruso. And it is in the amount of performance bond for $20,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Carried. Resolution 346 is appoint Green River Cemetery caretaker for 2022. That's Carl Hamilton. And that is for an annual fee of $1,000 paid quarterly, retroactive January 1st, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. 347 is to retain engineer, emergency responder radio communication system. And that is, let's see. Resolved that VCOM LLC dated proposal dated February 25th, 2022, provide engineering services required by the town at a cost not to exceed $10,500, with application renewal services to cost $700 per building application and/or site testing at $2,500 per building application.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 348 is to authorize retention of flight tech engineering by Cooley LLP for development and maintenance of special procedures for the East Hampton private use airport.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. We have items to discuss in exec session today.
We do. I move we go into exec session for CPF land acquisitions, licensing agreement, easements, and advice of counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
It is 1:45.
Shall we reconvene in exec at 2:30?
Perfect.
Sure.
Opportunity to grab some lunch.
All right, thank
We'll
you.
send out the link shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be